The Su-22M3 is a new squadron vehicle in the Soviet air tree for War Thunder. Let's check out this latest variable geometry jet. The Su-22M3 is a fourth-generation descendant of the original Su-7 fighter from 1955. One of the primary shortcomings of the Su-7 family was poor low-speed performance and high landing speeds. To that end, the Su-7IG prototype was built, taking the basic Su-7 design and giving it variable geometry wings. Performance was good enough to justify further development, with the project eventually leading to the Su-17 strike fighter in 1966. In addition to the new wings, the Su-17 featured a better engine, significantly upgraded avionics, more modern weapon systems, and some aerodynamic refinements. Unusually among Soviet aircraft, the export models of the Su-17 were given their own numerical identifiers instead of just adding a letter suffix onto the end. The Su-20 and Su-22 were essentially the same aircraft as the Su-17, but generally with minor changes to the electronics and avionics equipment, and some weapon system customizations to meet the requests of the client air forces. What we're looking at here is the Su-22M3, which was a pretty widely used version of the plane, and was functionally almost identical to the Su-17M. It was flown by Iraq, Libya, Peru, Poland, Syria, Hungary, Angola, East Germany, Czechoslovakia, Egypt, and Bulgaria. The plane has seen extensive combat use since it was introduced, fighting in no less than 10 armed conflicts, sometimes even being deployed as an improvised fighter rather than its intended ground attack role. One noteworthy incident, which has become somewhat well known online in recent years, took place in April of 1980 when a Peruvian pilot named Oscar Huerta supposedly intercepted a UFO. Believing it to be a reconnaissance balloon because of its silvery color, he actually scored hits with his 30mm cannon, but reported there was no effect on the object, which then evaded him until he was almost about to run out of fuel and had to go land. That the interception happened was confirmed by a large number of witnesses and radar data, but what he intercepted exactly remains the topic of speculation to this day. Personally, I think it was just a J-35 using its Arcade Battles flight model. In-game, the Su-22M3 is a squadron vehicle in the Soviet air tree. This plane only has a radar gun sight, but it gets a full ballistics computer for all of its weapons. And its weapons are impressive. The loadouts this plane carries include a huge selection of all the usual ordnance, plus some really high-performance air-to-ground missiles. One thing I'm especially happy to see are some loadouts which include the gun pods in addition to bombs and missiles. You don't get that too often, and I'm a huge fan of taking gun pods alongside regular ordnance. For air-to-air missiles, you get the R-60. This is a close-range dogfight missile. It loves flares, but otherwise tracks and turns very well. For air-to-ground missiles, you have a few options. First is the KH-23M. This is a basic manually guided missile, kind of analogous to the bullpup. Next is the S-25L. This is a tube-launched laser-guided missile. The S-25 has a rather small warhead comparatively, but you can still get kills with it on some targets if you get direct hits. The KH-23ML is another laser-guided missile, this time with a larger warhead and better armor penetration. Note on this one, a couple of the loadouts can take 4 of these. Now the big dog is the KH-29L, with its 150 kilogram warhead and 8 kilometer range. If you can spawn into close air support with these, you're gonna have a good day. Most of the dumb bomb loadouts have enough punch to take out a strategic base in air battles, and will give you a few leftovers for targets of opportunity. You get the full ballistics computer for all of this, as you'd expect from a plane at top tier, and the weapons are quite versatile. The flight performance of the Su-22M3 has some surprises. The first thing to remember is that, obviously, this plane has variable geometry wings. You can control the wing sweep manually or leave it in automatic mode. If you leave it in automatic mode, the AI will generally optimize the wing sweep for speed. If you control it manually, the primary advantage will be that you can fully unsweep the wings to gain some extra maneuverability for dogfighting. Now, the wing sweep mechanism is kind of slow, so if you fly in manual, you're going to have to be anticipating a few seconds ahead. Regardless, the Su-22 has the potential for surprising medium speed maneuverability. If you're careful, you can outturn stuff like F-4s and Jaguars. The speed is good, up to a point. The Su-22 has great acceleration through medium speeds, but once you get supersonic, you kind of hit a brick wall, and it's difficult to go much faster without climbing. Now, the raw power of the plane is enough to sustain speeds right around Mach 1 with a full weapons load, though, and the rate of climb is excellent. Being a swing-wing jet, this plane doesn't get combat flaps, but if you fully unsweep the wings, you don't really need them. Taking the Su-22M3 out into air battles gives some choices. If you want to take out strategic bases, go for ground units, or even fly out as a fighter. If you take the loadout of 6 R-60s, or even the missiles with gun pods, you can fly out as a plain old fighter if you want to. It takes some practice to use this plane as a pure dogfighter, but it can be made to work. Going out for ground attack gives some pretty flexible options. My preferred loadout is the 6 bombs, 2 R-60s, and gun pods. This gives enough bomb weight to take out a base and, still have 1 or 2 bombs miss, and then give some air-to-air combat potential after the ground strike. If you want to take this one out as close air support, it's going to cost you 865 spawn points to fly out with any of the guided weapons, so it's something to be aware of. Even still, the plane's weapons are very strong for flying CAS and ground battles, and if you can avoid enemy anti-air, you're going to have a lot of fun with this. The critical flaw of the Su-22M3 in any game mode, though, is that it has a very limited supply of countermeasures, which seriously impacts the survivability in top-tier BR-11 matches. Visually, the Su-17 family, including the 22M3, has always been one of my favorite-looking planes. Unfortunately, we only get one paint job right now. The Syrian Air Force camo really doesn't suit my fancy, and hopefully the community will churn out some good ones soon. Landing the Su-22 is pretty easy. After all, half the point of having the variable geometry wings on this thing was to improve low-speed performance and takeoff and landing runs. Make sure to use the manual wing sweep when you're going into land, so you can fully extend your wings and deploy the landing flaps. The plane has a decent drag chute, and the overall landing performance is excellent. The cockpit isn't one of my favorites. A major gripe is that, for some reason, the Soviet-style radar warning receivers aren't functional in War Thunder, but the Western ones all seem to be. If they ever get that working, the Su-22 has it in my favorite spot, but otherwise this cockpit isn't great. This is a Shakemaster 9000 plane, so the cockpit vibrations are going to be an issue, and the canopy bracing reduces visibility in air combat. The detail is good, but the poor visibility and non-functional avionics kill the immersion for me. To close out on the Su-22M3, this plane has incredibly potent air-to-ground weapons, including long-range laser-guided missiles, and some of its loadouts give really uncommon weapon combos. The variable geometry wings can give great low-speed performance, and its strong engine really delivers, especially after dropping your ordnance. However, the plane is very expensive in spawn points to take out as close air support with a decent loadout, and its countermeasures are far too limited. The final verdict on the Su-22M3 is that this plane has enormous potential both for air battles ground pounding and for tank battles close air support. If you want to beat the snot out of ground targets and still have some ability to defend yourself in air combat, this is a good option. Plus, it's a squadron vehicle, so you don't need to work through the whole tech tree to get it. As always, thanks for watching.